4-part series on heart disease. Dr. Shabnam Daskar is joining us. She's our Director of Medical Education. I'm Dr. Natasha Iyer, and I live and work in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We have a wonderful clinic. I'm saying wonderful because we help people live longer and healthier and feel better than ever. And we do this using the science around longevity and healthy aging. Some people call it lifestyle medicine. Often called functional medicine, which some people know what it is and others aren't quite sure. So functional medicine looks at the root cause of what's going on with you and how do we correct it and reverse it so that you feel your best.
Thank you, Natasha. So I'm wearing a red scarf and I'm very proud to have a Canadian badge. So this says Her Heart Matters. So February is Heart Disease Month. And of course, it's not just her heart that matters, his heart matters as well. But because women and heart disease and stroke, so when Dr. Iyer and I say cardiovascular disease, it's just a clever sounding term to describe heart disease and stroke. So when we say that, what we mean is in women, actually, heart disease and stroke, so cardiovascular disease is quite a bit different from what it is in men. And this is the month where Dr. Iyer and I are going to build some awareness about, what you can do. Number one, what to know about your risk. And we are going to focus on things you can do for yourself because, Natasha, you mentioned the term lifestyle change. So Dr. Iyer and I are in the world of therapeutic lifestyle change. And I also say we are in the food as medicine world. So what are we talking about today?
Food. Yes, food. Because, it's fascinating how little has changed over all this time in this drive to lower the heart disease risk, right? I mean, if you think about it, for the last 20 years, everything's been about lowering risk. I mean, you got this AHA, American Heart Association stamp on all these foods and healthy things. And, we've got all these drugs now geared toward lowering the risk of heart disease. And everybody's, taking aspirin if their cholesterol's high. If you even have a slightly high cholesterol, you should be on a statin drug. It's given to everyone. We're considered negligent if we do not write a prescription for a statin drug to lower cholesterol. And it me off that nothing is changing, right? Sorry, I bleeped myself out there. But the bottom line is, Dr. Carr, I mean, we're living in my children's father went to a cardiologist and he had no blood work or anything. He went for his first visit for some checkup of some sort. He was having some issue and his doctor said, go see a cardiologist. So he goes. And when he leaves with a prescription for a statin. And he says to the doctor, why are you giving me a prescription for cholesterol when you didn't do any blood tests on me? And I'm here because I was having, lightheadedness when I work out. What has that got to do with this prescription you've given me? And the doctor says, well, I looked on your history and you had slightly high cholesterol 5 years ago. So I'm just giving it to you because you need it. And of course he didn't fill the prescription. Of course he came to me and said, what is this? And I said, yes, they want to put it in the drinking water. And he said, that's what the doctor said. He said, this medicine should be in the drinking water so that everybody has it. So they will lower their risk for heart disease. And I said, are you aware that heart disease is rising? Like it's still happening more and more and more. And how common is this story? Oh, he was so young and healthy and he died of a heart attack. 43 years old, 56 years old, 53-year-old. I mean, that's our age group, right? And people are dropping dead of heart attacks when they're not overweight and their cholesterol's normal and they're doing all the healthy things. And so what is going on, Dr. Carr?
Thank you, Natasha. I think we should schedule another webinar on how many days do, life extension, how many days can people expect to live longer if they take a statin?
No, I
And
think you should say that very
no,
quickly
we are
because
going to,
that paper.
Natasha, let
No,
us
no,
finish
no, no,
talking
no.
about food.
Just say that much. What did that study show?
So there are a whole bunch of studies where people looked at the statistical significance, and it varies between 4 days and 19 days in people who are taking it as a prevention. So these are people who haven't had a cardiac event. So not someone who's had a heart attack or any of those. And in women, there is no data to support that. And Natasha, believe it or not, I had doctors telling me, these are doctors who write statin prescriptions all the time. They told me, I don't believe it. I said, this paper came out in Circulation. It's not like something
The
I
Journal of
manufactured.
Circulation dedicated to cardiovascular disease
Yep.
because all of it is to do with like your blood vessel system everywhere is part of your cardiovascular system. It's vascular, so the vessels, right? So vascular in your brain, vascular in your heart, but vascular everywhere. But we will just pause there because that's profound, that if you are found to have high cholesterol and you take a statin, your net life expectancy is extended by 4 to 19 days. And yet your risk for a heart attack is way higher than what you will believe. So when we all have a much higher risk of heart disease right now, right? It's something we'll get into at the next, because we're on a tight time frame today and we can gab a lot, Dr. Carr.
Oh,
So
yeah.
today I wanted to talk about what is a healthy diet.
So
And
I am going to share the screen.
now, are you able to share that triangle pyramid? Oh, there it is. There, that's exactly what it is.
Can you see it clearly, Natasha? Otherwise, I can zoom,
Yeah, I can.
zoom in. Okay.
No, I think it's perfect.
Okay.
So Dr. Carr and Michal are, no, I think if you make it slightly smaller, then we can see the end. Thank you. Okay. So, you know, the first most important thing is the Canada Food Guide was altered to be somewhat better than it used to be. However, not one of my patients who goes to a heart specialist comes back knowing what a healthy diet is. They're told to eat margarine instead of butter. They're told to eat whole wheat bread instead of bread. They're told to eat, to move more, but there's no actual idea of what that means. So I got told to exercise and lose weight. Okay, and how? You know, how much of exercise? How do you lose weight? Because how many people have tried to lose weight and it's a battle they lose when they try to fight it, so they give up, right? So weight loss is a whole other ball game to talk about, but it is foundational to what you eat. And a lot of people say, oh, but you know, I gained weight because I'm really not moving as much. The first most important thing is that I could sit on my butt for a week and I would not gain weight, and I can cause myself to actually burn fat based on what I put in my mouth. So food and your food consumption have more to do with your weight than moving. I'm not saying don't move. Moving is critical for your health, but over exercising and exercising are not going to cause you to lose weight to be healthier. Now we're talking about heart disease risk. So yes, weight loss is important, but I want to talk about the food myths and facts when it comes to heart disease, which translates into overall healthy aging and longevity.
Thank you, Natasha. And that is what Dr. Aaron and I want to highlight, mostly about, you know, you always hear that you need to eat whole grains, they're extremely healthy. But the fact is, and particularly since we're talking more about women today, for women, diabetes or having higher than normal blood glucose levels, high triglycerides, high blood pressure are a way more important risk factors, sorry, not one, than your LDL or your total cholesterol. Now, today is not about cholesterol, but the fact is, some of my patients, and this is if you, again, Natasha, comes the question of belief. I'll say, find someone telling me I don't believe that. So if you don't believe me and Dr. Iyer, what I would suggest is eat a nice whole grain. What will they eat? Bread, Natasha? A sandwich? So eat a nice whole grain sandwich. And if you have one of those glucometers at home, check your blood glucose levels before you eat it, so in the fasted state, and 1 hour and 2 hours after you've eaten that healthy whole grain, whatever, and just let us know what you found. And again, it's different things for different people. Many of my patients got the shock of their lives because they thought they were eating extremely healthy because, Natasha, I come from India. A lot of my patients are from India. So they eat roti, which is like traditional food, you see, but that roti is not made of whole grains.
How I miss roti.
I know, we'll talk about that some other time. So you don't have to believe both of us. Just see what happens with you, or you can use a continuous blood glucose monitor to check as well. So there are different ways of looking at it. And more importantly, Natasha, will you tell us a little bit about how inflammatory sometimes grains can be for people, and what role does inflammation have in heart health?
I was going to talk about inflammation and grain, but before that, I want to just clarify the point you were making. So dysglycemia, or poor blood sugar regulation, is tied into a condition called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is the precursor to heart disease, dementia, all the diseases you do not want to get. If you have insulin resistance, you're going to get those. So when Dr. Carr says, know what your food does to your blood sugar levels, we obsess with blood sugar levels. Because if you manage healthy blood sugar, and no one's telling you this, not one physician is going to tell you to manage your sugars to a tight, narrow level in order to not get a heart attack. They're going to talk to you about fat, right? And fat, cholesterol levels above 5.2, your total cholesterol is considered high. I eat avocados every day. We eat eggs multiple times a week. We eat red meat 3 to 4 times a week in my house. We eat chicken with the skin on, right? We eat bacon. We eat, what other foods are considered unhealthy?
I've forgotten, actually.
I'm sorry, like I'm looking there. So we eat lots of fish, but I put coconut oil in almost, like my children ate a homemade granola cereal that I made for them, and I put coconut oil inside. I add olive oil to everything. I add MCT oil to things. We eat a very fat dominant diet in my house. My children are not overweight, and my total cholesterol is 4.2, right? And my LDL is less than 2, which is what you want for, if you have heart disease risk, they want your levels less than 2. And I do that eating a high fat diet. So is diet rich in fats really the issue when it comes to cholesterol? And is cholesterol the actual issue as well to have a heart attack? Because again, we'll say it, everybody's on a statin to lower their cholesterol, and yet heart disease is rising. More people are getting heart attacks. So what is the deal? So yes, we're clarifying that you need to, there's more to the cholesterol story than what you've been told. And there's more to the don't eat fat story than what you've been told. And that's why we're having this conversation today, because I want you to eat good fats. When I say I eat a fat dominant diet and I'm eating red meat, I try to buy grass-fed, grass-finished beef for the most part. Beef is frighteningly expensive right now. So that being said, Other sources in my freezer, I bought goat and lamb from a local farmer who feeds his animals well and takes care of them. Canadian beef, according to Michal Offer, our functional nutrition consultant. So in her research, she's shown that Canadian beef is still healthier for you than no beef at all, just trim the fat off. Whereas on my grass-fed, grass-finished steaks, I eat all of the fat. Right? So it's the source of the meat and the quality of the meat. So if you're buying chicken from the grocery store, then yes, please don't eat the skin and don't eat the fat, trim it all off. You want to eat the protein. Protein from animals is truly one of the most bioavailable sources of protein. And I honestly don't mind if you eat a snake or a spider or anything that moves. All of anything that moves that has protein in it is the best form of protein for you. And I notice, so if you look here on this chart, it's got beans and lentils mostly for vegetarians. We in our house do not consume beans and lentils because I think they're as inflammatory or almost as inflammatory as grain. So now that I've rambled, let's go to grain and inflammation. Well, what is inflammation and what does it do in the body is the first question. Inflammation is a body's response to try and trigger healing, but it actually makes things more angry first, right? So when you get injured, when you get a cut, you get inflammation first and then you get healing. Inflammation should be a transient response in the body. It should not be prolonged. Today, almost everyone's walking around with low grade or higher grades of inflammation. One of the foundational causes or contributors to inflammation is your diet. Now that combined with the state of health of your gut, so can't talk about it today, but there's something called leaky gut or intestinal permeability, food sensitivities and how that affects your immune system. We also know that immune system dysfunction is one of the main reasons you can make a plug in your heart blood vessels, right? So if you had healthy immune system function, you would not make that plug in the heart blood vessel and block it up to make a heart attack. All of that being said, you do not want inflammation. And here I am saying food causes inflammation. It's one of the causes. There are many causes for inflammation in your body. And what we're finding is that when we're working with patients to reduce their risk for all diseases and to help them feel better than ever, we need to treat inflammation first. So grain in general, and I'll tell you a story about myself. I have had I had met all the criteria for fibromyalgia by the time I was 30. I walked around in pain all day long. I had 15 to 17 migraines in a month. And we know that the more inflamed you are, the more migraines you'll have. So over the years and through my functional medicine process, I have healed myself. I'm nowhere near what I used to be. I used to be a size extra large. I was in pain at all times. I struggled with my weight. I had, you name the issue, I had it. And today I'm happy to say that I can honestly say I feel well. I don't walk around with pain. I don't walk around with headaches. I might get them, but it's not like the constant state of being. I can manage my weight easily. I have great energy. I'm no longer only functioning for 5 or 6 hours a day. I can start my day in the morning and go through till 10, 11, midnight. I do on call 3 days in a row, right? And I don't struggle with my energy. So all of that being said, if I eat grain, and I mean any grain. Now, I live a gluten-free lifestyle because gluten is very toxic to me and all of the issues, medical concerns I had in my past. But even if I eat gluten-free grains like rice, oats, gluten-free baking, they use all the gluten-free grains to make flour and you bake with it. If I eat any of that, I get inflammation in my hand joints. They swell up, they hurt. I struggle to open bottles or carry things. And so I see a direct correlation. Now, if you're eating multiple things that are inflaming you and you stop eating one thing, you're never going to know if it helped or not. So I have people who say to me, oh yeah, you know, I tried going gluten-free. It did nothing for me. Yeah, but did you try going grain-free? Did you try being dairy-free at the same time? Because dairy is very inflammatory. It's the cow milk protein. A lot of people don't want to hear this because they don't want to change how they live their lives, right? Did you try going legume-free at the same time as well? Because only when you take away all sugar-free, alcohol-free, you've got to take all of those foods out and then put them back one at a time in order to know which one is inflaming you or causing you issues. Now, I know people who can eat grain and feel fine. I don't know that they're really fine because I personally believe in the paleo lifestyle. But there are people who don't feel overt inflammation. And when I measure them, they do just fine. So, you know, I say carry on as long as your weight's not an issue, your sugars are not an issue, your continuous blood glucose monitoring or your 3-month cumulative profile of your blood sugars. If all of those are normal and you're eating grain in that amount, continue on, right? But for me personally and within my family, we're a grain-free, legume-free, dairy-free family because these are known provokers of inflammation in the body. And I don't think we have the time to go into the mechanism of how these things inflame you. Suffice to say that beans and lentils, so legumes, and grain all have anti-nutrients in them. It prevents them from sprouting. This is why you can store them for years on the shelf, right? And there are also anti-nutrients to prevent animals from overeating them. In fact, there's a lot of plants with anti-nutrients of different types, but I'm talking about grain and legume right now. And what we know is that it's the anti-nutrients in these that also impact your body's ability to absorb good nutrition from the rest of your food.
Thank you, Natasha.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I just want to make a few comments because we are almost going to run out of time. Number one is a lot of people, including doctors, are under this impression that your blood cholesterol is related to food cholesterol. And that is not true.
Thank you.
Our bodies have the ability to make cholesterol. In fact, the brain, we are all fat heads, we have fatty brain. And interestingly, the other major problem, which we are going to see more of given the ongoing pandemic, is cholesterol levels can go up when you are dealing with an infection, when you're dealing with an autoimmune condition. And another common reason for high total cholesterol is hypothyroidism. If your thyroid is not functioning optimally, then however much of statin and everything you can take, it's because, see, we look as functional medicine doctors, we look at what is happening upstream. And when Dr. Iyer talked about inflammation, so inflammation is something that you need to survive. If you don't have it, you get a small little cut, and if the immune system does not mount an inflammatory process, you're going to bleed and die. But when that background inflammation continues for a long time, and the interesting thing is, Natasha, how many patients who are not in your or my practice in India are not tested for something called HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein? So that is a marker of inflammation. There are others as well, but that is commonly available anywhere in the world. And high inflammation is related to 95% of chronic disease, whether we're talking about heart health, brain health. And you will notice in this pyramid that it says lifestyle for healthy heart and brain. So what is good for the heart is good for the brain. And likewise, what is good for the brain is good for the heart. So when it comes to food, the food we don't want are those that raise your blood glucose levels very high. And Natasha, when you talked about the tight range, so in Canada, if you're looking at the Canadian ranges, it is between 3.9 millimoles to 7.3, maybe 7.7.
Actually, no, it's the top end of the range is 6. So at 6.1, you are now considered pre-diabetic, and above 6.9, you're considered diabetic. And I always say to patients, by the time you get there, the damage has already started. And heart disease starts in your teens and your 20s.
So Natasha, before you continue with that, I'll just give the other units because we have listeners from the US and India as well. So it's
Right.
between 70 and 130 milligram per deciliter for those who are using that unit. And again, this, you will not always find it reflected in your hemoglobin A1C, which your doctor does religiously. And for some people, that is a very, very poor measure of blood glucose. It measures other things. If you have iron deficiency.
So before we run out of time, I just wanted to cotton on to what you said about fat head and cholesterol being manufactured by your body. Your body in all of its wisdom was not designed to waste anything. You put that really beautifully in our previous podcast that we just recorded. And so why should your liver have the capacity to make cholesterol? Well, because it is so important that you can't live without it. If you had no cholesterol, you would not have the parent molecule to make something called cortisol, which is a life-sustaining hormone. Without cortisol, you would die in 3 days. Like that's a big deal. Without cholesterol, you cannot manage your cell membranes. Can you live if your cells all fall apart? Without cholesterol, you cannot make the sheath around your nerve cells. You can't make healthy brain cells. So cholesterol is a critically important molecule in your body, and that's why your body can make it. In our world of functional medicine, there are 3 main areas we look at when your cholesterol is high, because we ask, why is your cholesterol high? What is your body telling us? So we're not dealing with people who are eating McDonald's and Pizza Hut and French fries and drinking soda pop all day long. We're dealing with people who are eating whole grains. They're using margarine instead of butter because it's supposed to be healthier. It's not, by the way. Do not eat margarine, ever. But we're dealing with people who are trying their best to be healthy, and they're trying to educate themselves. They know what a vegetable is. It's not potatoes. French fries are not a vegetable. So they're eating their broccoli, they're eating their cabbage, they're eating all their vegetables, and they're still challenged with what's going on with me. So we're talking about a more sophisticated crowd of people. We always work on cortisol, thyroid, insulin levels right off the bat on patients. So your LDL cholesterol particle has receptors for thyroid hormone on it. Isn't that interesting? So why are we treating a high cholesterol if we haven't fully assessed and treated the thyroid optimally? So outside of that, when you have a high cholesterol, we look at, do you have a chronic or low-grade viral infection, or any kind of low-grade infection? Do you have a micronutrient deficiency? Diets today are very depleted in nutrients. The soil is depleted, food is over-farmed. There's many reasons to have micronutrient deficiencies, including this thing called leaky gut and intestinal permeability. And then the third thing is heavy metal toxicity and toxins in general. So we divide them into heavy metals and environmental pollutants, which is a talk for another day. But in our world, we say, why is your cholesterol high? What do we treat to let your body stop making it in excess? And then we look at, and in another webinar coming up, we're going to teach you more about cholesterol and what you need to know about it. So suffice to say that you do need to eat a lot of your vegetables, your high fiber vegetables that, and in your diagram here, it says non-starchy vegetables. So things that grow above the ground. I would eliminate beans and lentils. First of all, I don't believe in vegetarianism as an optimal diet. Although people who are born as vegetarians or who are ethical and philosophical vegetarians, I support them in that, but beans and legumes can really hurt your health instead of help it. So it's all person dependent, and this is how we work with patients. We don't say, no, you can't be a vegetarian, but when we do the testing and we find that, we might say, this might be more optimal for you instead of that. And you get to make the choice. the bottom line is you need to eat to manage inflammation. So the things that help you the most are high quality protein accompanied by good fats. You can see your healthy fats there. You can see fish, seafood, that's a crab there, avocado, eggs, olive oil, coconut. Is that a nice steak? Yes, that is a good steak.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So the protein and the fats are your primary foundational, most important foods. And then you add your non-starchy vegetables with a few starchy vegetables, depending on your blood sugar levels, your activity level, and multiple other things, which we measure. And so we talk to you when you're insulin resistant, and we measure the level of insulin resistance. Then we tell you how much starch can you eat. And yes, there are no grains on this plan here. There's a small amount of fruit, which again, be careful of, because people tend to think fruit is healthy, so I'm just going to eat 3 cups in a day, right? That's
Make it
sugar.
into a smoothie.
And it turns into sugar, which stimulates insulin, which challenges your pancreas and your liver and affects your cholesterol ultimately, and your heart disease risk. Now, the last thing is, when I say food or feeding your body, I love that this is not just food on this pyramid. So you can see social connections, mind-body interventions, sleep, sunlight and the outdoors, and movement. I'm a minute over time, so I'm just going to say that this is also ways to feed your body and feed your health, right? So don't forget that. I mean, I have a lot of people go, oh, but I exercise and I eat well. And yet they're the most stressed out people. They have poor relationships, they're unhappy, and then they wonder why their heart disease risk is elevated. You will elevate your heart disease risk by being under constant stress and being unhappy. So feed your mind and feed your body with all of these good things. I would say avoid grain completely, avoid vegetable oils, noting that they're in every single processed food and every restaurant you go to.
Natasha, will you say a little bit about the cooking oils, because we are running out of time?
We
So you
are out of
mentioned
time.
vegetable oils. Yeah.
So
So what
I
should
just would
people
not
use?
do not use canola oil, and do not use sunflower oil or anything that comes. Now, when we say vegetable oils, don't think that we're talking about olive oil. Although olive oil has a low smoke point, so you must know the smoke point of your oil, because when it reaches the smoke point, it is bad for you. It is going to cause lots of negative impact on your levels of inflammation and your state of aging and metabolism. So the higher the smoke point, the easier it is to fry or grill or broil. The lower the smoke point, use it raw. So put olive oil on your salads. If you're just doing a low temperature poaching or baking, yes, you can use that. But that's the thing about the oils, that when they become smoky, or if they're vegetable oils, they're actually really unhealthy for you.
Thank you. And what I tell people is, it's better to eat your ancestral oils, but again, there are a lot of caveats, because some of your ancestral oils may have gone through a lot of processing. So it's like, so I have, most of my patients are in India, so they'll ask, oh, my ancestors ate, coconut oil. I said, yes, coconut oil that your ancestors ate was the one that was like minimally processed, versus nowadays you get some where even the smell of coconut has gone. So that obviously goes through a whole lot more processing. And the other factor that I wish to quote Mikhail, she says, eat those food that are naturally fatty. So coconut oil is fatty, olive oil is fatty. Then if you come from an ancestry where they used lard for cooking, Natasha, I know you talked about the quality of meat. So back in the days, people didn't have to go looking for grass-fed beef, grass-fed, grass-finished, because it was all just that, right? So when it comes to food, the most important point is, how much have you improved your food from what was the baseline? So Dr. Iyer mentioned about people who eat McDonald's and all of these. For them, if they just switch to a real food diet, they already see a lot of changes. But people
And this
who
is
come
why
to us,
people who
yeah,
switch to vegetarian will always say, oh, it's the best thing I ever did. I feel so
yeah,
good. Yeah, come talk to me in 7 to 10 years when you've depleted all your nutrient stores in your liver and all of that, and the proteins are no longer enough to manage your muscle mass health. Well, that's a story for a different day. I will say I am opposed to people consuming dairy, especially in North America. I'm not as opposed to it in Europe, but again, suffice to say, I like that you said if tolerated. So for some people, I will actually eliminate, as I said, all of these things, and then I will check their levels of inflammation once they add it back into their diet, because there's a lot of people who want dairy in their diet. I can tell you it's pretty easy to live dairy-free. There are so many alternatives today. If you want your latte, there's almond milk, there's oat milk. I just stay away from oat no matter how healthy, like how good people say it is, because I just assume that oats are higher in carbs. And so why would I want to have the oat milk? So I used almond milk. But now we have to end. We have to say, I hope we opened your eyes to how to feed your heart and your brain in a different way from what you might be used to. And the biggest thing about margarine is it's completely chemical. I use ghee in my house, that's clarified butter. So we heat it, strain it, and take out all the milk solids, and then we have the pure fat left over, and it's wonderful. I save the fat from my bacon, so I use bacon fat a lot. If I'm cooking lamb and there's a lot of fat, I will save that and use that. So I'm a huge fan of good fats. And now I've pointed out animal fats, which you were told all along you should avoid. And I'm here to tell you that there's no longer any evidence to say that animal fat is bad for you. And if you're curious, there's a book called The Big Fat
Surprise.
Lie, or is it The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz? The Big Fat Surprise. And then there's Zoe Harcombe and her website and her book. So if you want to educate yourself, please do re-educate yourself, because there's new news for healthy food and how to feed your body and your mind. And see, in our recommendations, it's not just food, but other things to feed yourself with as well. Thank you for joining us. I hope this was useful, and we will see you next week.